So today, we're going to break down one of the most powerful and honestly one of the most intuitive tools in all of machine learning, the decision tree. And here's the best part. It works just like a simple game you've definitely played before.
I mean, really think about that for a second. You go online, you apply for a credit card, and bam! Before you can even get up to make a coffee, you get a yes or a no. How on earth can a machine make such a huge decision about your life that fast? What is actually going on behind that screen?
Well, the secret is, that machine is playing a ridiculously fast, ridiculously efficient game of 20 questions. For every single person who applies, it's just asking a series of really simple, targeted questions to figure out where you belong. And that right there is the core idea we're going to unpack.
Okay, so let's get our hands dirty and actually build this machine, question by question, so you can see exactly how it works. Here's the setup. A bank needs to sort through all its applicants. So we give the machine a whole bunch of historical data, people's income, their credit score, and crucially, whether they were approved or rejected in the past. The machine's entire job is to learn the secret patterns hiding in all that data.
Now, this is where it gets really smart. The very first question the machine learns to ask isn't random. It's not a guess. It is the single most powerful question it can ask to start sorting everybody out. And in our data, that question is this person's annual income more than $110,000?
And just like that, with one simple yes or no question, that whole big, messy pile of applicants gets split into two much neater piles. You've got the high earners over here and everyone else over there. This is the first big step in making sense of the chaos.
But of course, we're not done yet. You can see the groups are still pretty mixed. So the machine needs to dig a little deeper. It needs to ask the next most powerful question to get even more clarity. And for both groups, that question is all about their credit score.
And this is just brilliant. This shows you how the machine adapts. It's not asking the same cookie-cutter question to everyone. For that lower income group, the bar is set a little higher. It asks if their credit score is above 710. But for the high-income folks, it just wants to know if their score is above 690. The rules actually change depending on the path you're on.
So what we've just built together, this flowchart of questions, well, that is exactly what a decision tree is. It's just a model that sorts information down a series of branches using simple rules until it gets to a final answer.
Okay, which brings us to the big question, right? How in the world did the machine know that asking about income at the $110,000 mark was the smartest first move? Why not ask about credit score first or something totally different? The answer all comes down to a concept called impurity. Just think of a group of applicants as impure if it's a messy, random mix of approvals and rejections. A group is pure if it's almost all approvals or almost all rejections. The goal of every single question is to split one messy, impure group into two pure groups.
Okay, look at this. It makes it so clear. The smart question about income over 110K? It does a fantastic job. It carves out a group that is almost entirely made up of approvals. That creates a ton of purity. But that dumb question, asking about income over 70K? It doesn't really help us much. Both groups it creates are still a jumbled mess. It gives us almost no new information.
And we can actually see this. The smart question gives us this massive drop in impurity. It brings so much clarity. The dumb question, it barely moves the needle. So the algorithm, it basically tests every single possible question it could ask, and it picks the one that gives it the biggest win, the biggest jump in clarity.
But like with anything, you can have too much of a good thing. This process of asking questions can go way too far. What happens when the machine gets obsessed with purity and just starts overthinking?
Well, that leads to a huge problem in machine learning called overfitting. It's like a tale of two trees. On the left, you've got a good, simple tree. It gets the big picture, the main patterns. But on the right, you have an overfitted tree. It's this chaotic, complex monster because it's tried to create a special, unique rule for every single person in the past, including all the weird flukes and noise. It's basically memorized the old test, so it's terrible when it sees a new question. So the solution is just knowing when to stop asking questions. And we do this with a technique called pruning. And yeah, it is exactly what it sounds like. We strategically snip off those smaller, less important branches, the ones that are just chasing outliers, to keep the tree simple and focused on the patterns that actually matter.
All right, so we've built the tree, we've pruned it to keep it from overthinking. Now for the main event. How do we actually use this thing to make a final decision on a brand new applicant?
Well, when a new applicant's info comes in, it travels down the tree, right? It answers each question along the way, taking a left or a right, until it hits a dead end. That final stopping point, where there are no more questions to ask, that's what we call a leaf node. And that leaf holds the answer.
And the way it makes the final call is actually super simple. It's just a vote. The machine just looks at all the historical people who ended up in that exact same leaf. So, if 80 of them were approved and only 20 were rejected, well, the majority wins. The prediction for our new applicant is approved. Simple as that.
So we've gone pretty deep into how this 20 questions machine works. But why should you care? Why is this one algorithm so important and used all over the place?
Well, it's because this exact same question and answer logic works for almost everything. In healthcare, it's asking about symptoms to help diagnose a disease. In a factory, it's asking about sensor readings to spot a defective part. In retail, it's predicting which customers might leave. And of course, in finance, it's a total workhorse for finding fraud and assessing risk.
But, maybe their greatest strength, their superpower, really, is that you can see how they think. A lot of algorithms are what we call a black box. An answer comes out, but you have no idea why. With the decision tree, you can literally follow the exact path of questions that led to a decision. You can understand the why behind the what.
And that really brings us to the final critical thought here. We live in a world where algorithms are making more and more huge decisions about our lives, about our loans, our jobs, even our health. So the ability to understand how those decisions get made is more important than ever. I mean, if a machine has that kind of power over you, shouldn't you be able to know what questions it's asking?